Have you ever paused at a doorway, hesitated before a major life decision, or felt that strange tension between what was and what could be? That moment, that space between, is one of the most powerful and ancient experiences we share as human beings. And across time and culture, we've populated those liminal spaces with protectors, challengers, and guides known as the guardians of the threshold. These are the mystical watchers, the silent sentinels stationed at the borders of the known and the unknown. From the great stone sphinxes of Egypt, gazing eternally toward the horizon, to the bridge keepers of Norse myth demanding answers from wandering souls, these beings give form to our deepest anxieties and highest aspirations about crossing over. What's fascinating is how universal this concept truly is. It isn't confined to one tradition or one part of the world. Whether it's a dragon coiled around a hidden treasure, a spirit questioning travelers at a sacred river, or a celestial being guarding the gates of heaven, threshold guardians appear again and again. They don't just block the way, they test, they teach, and they transform. They represent that critical moment of passage where we are forced to confront our fears, prove our worth, or surrender our old selves in order to become something new. And in today's world, we face these thresholds constantly, starting a new job, moving to a new city, beginning or ending relationships, or even wrestling with our own inner doubts and dreams. In this video, we're going to journey across continents and centuries to uncover the origins, meanings, and enduring power of these extraordinary beings. We'll explore why ancient civilizations felt such a powerful need to place guardians at their temples and tombs, how these figures evolved in stories and rituals, and what they reveal about our own psychological landscapes. Most importantly, we'll discover what these age-old myths can teach us about navigating the uncertainties and transformations in our own lives. So come with us through the gate, across the bridge, into the space between, and meet the guardians who have watched over humanity's most sacred crossings since the dawn of time. So what exactly are these beings that stand between worlds? At their core, threshold guardians are more than just mythical security systems. They are the living embodiment of a boundary itself. They are supernatural entities specifically charged with watching over a liminal space, a place of transition. This could be the physical entrance to a sacred temple, the metaphysical bridge connecting the land of the living to the realm of the dead, or even a spiritual portal to higher consciousness. Their sole purpose is to regulate passage, to decide who may cross and who may not, but their methods and motivations are as varied as the cultures that imagined them. You might encounter a guardian in the form of a terrifying beast, like a many-headed hydra or a fire-breathing dragon, designed to evoke immediate fear and turn back the unworthy. Or you might meet a more enigmatic figure, a silent spirit, a wise angel, or a riddling sphinx whose challenge is less about brute force and more about intellect, purity, or resolve. Crucially, these guardians are not arbitrary obstacles. They are tests of worthiness. A dragon hoarding gold isn't just a monster. It is the final exam for a hero, proving they have the courage and strength to claim a treasure. A spirit asking a riddle at a crossroads isn't merely being difficult. It is assessing a traveler's wisdom and right to proceed to a sacred destination. This dual nature is their defining feature. They are both protectors and challengers. They protect the sanctity of the space beyond from those who would defile it with ignorance or ill intent, and they challenge those who seek to enter, forcing them to demonstrate that they are prepared for the transformation that awaits on the other side. This universal concept points to a profound, shared human understanding. We instinctively recognize that any meaningful transition, whether it's entering a holy place, embarking on a new phase of life, or pursuing profound knowledge should not be undertaken lightly. It demands reverence, it requires preparation, and very often it involves a direct confrontation with whatever we fear most, whether that fear is external or a manifestation of our own inner doubts. The Guardian makes this confrontation literal. It gives our abstract anxieties a face and a form, making the challenge something that can be seen, understood, and ultimately overcome. In this way, the myths of old are far more than simple stories. They are mirrors, reflecting the very real psychological guardians each of us must face at the thresholds in our own lives: the fear of failure that guards a new career path, the grief that stands watch over a personal loss, or the self-doubt that blocks creative expression. These inner sentinels, much like their mythical counterparts, are not there to forever deny us passage, but to ensure that when we do cross, we are truly ready for what comes next. To truly grasp the power these guardians held, we need to journey back in time to the very cradle of civilization. Long before these concepts were written into epic poems or carved into cathedral stone, ancient cultures were already giving form to their fears and reverence at the world's edges. This deep-seated human instinct to mark and protect a boundary finds some of its earliest and most striking expressions in the dust and heat of ancient Mesopotamia. Here, at the entrances to immense, tiered ziggurat stairways to the heavens, stood the Lamassu. These were not mere statues, they were believed to be living, breathing protectors. Imagine approaching such a place. You're met by a colossal figure with the powerful body of a bull, the majestic wings of an eagle, and the wise, watchful face of a human king. This hybrid form was a masterpiece of symbolic design, combining the strength of the earth, the authority of mankind, and the divinity of the skies into a single, awe-inspiring sentinel. Their purpose was explicit: to ward off malevolent spirits and ensure that only those with pure intent could approach the sacred space within. They were the ultimate gatekeepers, blending overwhelming physical presence with profound spiritual significance. This practice of placing formidable hybrid creatures at thresholds was a concept that traveled and evolved. In ancient Egypt, the archetypal guardian took the form of the Sphinx. Lining the processional avenues to great temples and tombs, these recumbent figures with the body of a lion and the head of a pharaoh projected an air of serene, unmovable power. They were more than protectors, they were a statement. The lion's body symbolized immense strength and royalty, while the human head represented intelligence and divine authority. Together, they communicated that to pass this point was to enter a domain governed by both immense power and supreme order. The most famous Sphinx at Giza guards the plateau containing pharaonic tombs, its gaze fixed eternally on the eastern horizon, forever watching over the sacred journey of the sun god and the dead kings it was built to protect. It wasn't just blocking a path, it was defining a sacred frontier between the mundane world and the realm of gods and eternity. Meanwhile, in the rich tapestry of Greek mythology, the concept of the threshold guardian took a more visceral and terrifying turn deep within the underworld. Here, at the final, irrevocable crossing point into the realm of Hades, stood Cerberus. This was no majestic stone monument but a living, breathing nightmare, a massive, three-headed hound with a serpent for a tail and a mane of venomous snakes. His role was brutally simple: to prevent the living from entering the land of the dead, and just as crucially, to prevent the souls of the departed from ever leaving. Cerberus represented the absolute and final nature of death itself. The barrier he guarded was the ultimate one-way door, and his fearsome appearance was a perfect metaphor for the primal terror and finality that ancient Greeks associated with this final transition. His defeat or appeasement became a central task for heroes like Heracles, symbolizing a confrontation with mortality itself. This need to physically manifest guardians at sacred gateways flourished spectacularly in the Hindu tradition. Step up to any ancient temple in India and you will be greeted by the Devarapalas, literally, door guards. These are often massive, intricately sculpted figures flanking the entrance, their muscular forms frozen in a dynamic pose, often holding a fearsome weapon like a mace or a club. Their expressions are not always benign. They can appear fierce and intimidating, a clear warning to those who might approach with disrespect. Yet they are not considered evil. They are divine bouncers, devoted servants of the gods within, and their ferocity is a reflection of their sacred duty. Before entering, a devotee might offer a small prayer or gesture to these guardians, acknowledging their authority and seeking their permission to cross into the divine presence. This practice beautifully illustrates the dual nature of these beings. They are obstacles that must be acknowledged and respected before one can receive the blessings that lie beyond. And we find this theme echoed in the colder, starker myths of the Norse peoples. Their cosmology was filled with borders between the 9 realms, and these borders required watchers. One of the most poignant is Modgud, the guardian of the bridge Gijalabru, which spans the tumultuous river Yerl that separates the land of the living from the underworld of hell. She is not a monstrous beast but a giantess, a solemn and imposing figure who questions every soul that seeks to cross. Her role is to judge the worthiness of the dead, challenging them and ensuring the natural order is maintained. She is the final question, the last barrier before the soul enters its final resting place, embodying the Norse belief that even in death, passage was not automatic but had to be earned or accounted for. When we step back and look at this incredible historical tapestry, from the Lamassu of Mesopotamia to the bridge keepers of Norse hell, a profound pattern emerges. Despite vast geographical distances and cultural differences, these ancient societies independently arrived at the same profound idea. They all felt a deep, intuitive need to ritualize the act of crossing a boundary. A simple doorway wasn't enough. A gate required a guardian. This wasn't just about physical security. It was about spiritual hygiene. It was the belief that transitions between states, whether from profane to sacred, living to dead, or known to unknown, were perilous moments of vulnerability that required powerful, symbolic protection. By embedding these guardians into their spiritual architecture and their most cherished stories, they were giving form to a universal human experience, the mix of awe, caution, and reverence we all feel when standing at the brink of something truly momentous. But what is it about these guardians that resonates so deeply across time? Beyond their fearsome forms and ancient roles, they tap into something fundamental within the human psyche. They are powerful symbols, giving tangible shape to the intangible struggles we all face during times of change. At their core, threshold guardians represent the psychological barriers that arise whenever we stand on the precipice of something new. That dragon-breathing fire isn't just a monster, it is the embodiment of our own fear of failure. The silent spirit demanding a password at the bridge gives form to our nagging self-doubt. The Sphinx posing a riddle becomes a metaphor for the confusing uncertainty that clouds our judgment when we're caught between a familiar past and an unpredictable future. These mythical beings externalize our internal conflicts, making the abstract challenges of transition something we can see, name, and ultimately confront. This entire concept is rooted in the anthropological idea of liminality, a term derived from the Latin word for threshold. A liminal space is that unnerving, in-between state where the old rules no longer apply, but the new ones haven't yet taken shape. It's the moment after you've left a job but before you've started a new one. It's the period of grief after a loss where the world feels unfamiliar and unstable. It's the anxiety-filled wait for important news. In these liminal phases, our sense of identity can feel fluid, even fragile. Ancient cultures understood this discomfort instinctively, and they populated these psychological spaces with guardians. These beings don't just block a physical path, they personify the very ambiguity of the threshold itself. Their presence ritualizes the discomfort, teaching us that this state of flux is not an error to be avoided but a necessary, albeit difficult, stage of transformation. To pass the guardian is to move through this discomfort and emerge with a new, solidified sense of self on the other side. The specific form a guardian takes offers a profound clue about the nature of the challenge it represents. Consider the difference between a ferocious dragon and a serene, wise gatekeeper. A dragon coiled around a hoard of gold often symbolizes the intense internal resistance we must overcome to claim our own potential or treasure. Its fiery breath represents the consuming fear that we are not worthy, that we will be burned by the responsibility of success, or that we must fight a brutal internal battle to earn our reward. Overcoming it requires raw courage and force of will. In stark contrast, a calm, enigmatic gatekeeper who asks a thoughtful question or demands a symbolic offering represents a different kind of challenge altogether. This guardian symbolizes the wisdom, patience, and introspection required for true growth. Passing this test isn't about combat, it's about demonstrating understanding, humility, or purity of intention. It teaches that some thresholds cannot be forced but must be approached with respect and a willingness to learn. Furthermore, the characteristics of these guardians are a direct reflection of the cultural values that created them. A society that prizes heroic conquest and individual glory, like ancient Greece, will create guardians like the Hydra or the Minotaur, monsters that must be slain through physical prowess and cunning. A culture that emphasizes spiritual purity and philosophical inquiry, like many Eastern traditions, might feature guardians that test one's knowledge, morality, or enlightenment through riddles or moral dilemmas. The guardian, therefore, becomes a cultural teacher. Its very existence reinforces what that society believes is necessary to evolve, to be deemed worthy of crossing into a higher state of being. It communicates that growth is never free or easy. It demands that we face a challenge head-on, and the nature of that challenge tells us what our culture values most in its heroes, its saints, and its evolved individuals. By pulling back the curtain on their symbolic roles, we uncover a universal truth about the human experience. Every significant crossing in life, whether literal or deeply metaphorical, involves a negotiation between risk and reward. The risk is represented by the guardian, the potential for failure, embarrassment, loss, or even psychological pain. The reward is what lies beyond: new knowledge, personal transformation, spiritual enlightenment, or a hard-won treasure. The guardian ensures that the reward is never cheapened. It guarantees that the transformation is earned, making it meaningful and permanent. This ancient narrative reminds us that the barriers we face are not arbitrary punishments but integral parts of the journey itself. They are the refining fire that forges a stronger self, the challenging question that leads to deeper wisdom, and the necessary fear that makes courage possible. In understanding the guardian, we ultimately understand something vital about ourselves and the timeless process of becoming who we are meant to be. Across the vast expanse of human imagination, from the misty highlands of Scotland to the sun-drenched temples of Mesoamerica, these threshold guardians take on forms as diverse as the cultures that gave them life, yet their core purpose remains hauntingly familiar. Consider the Celtic Sith, a creature of awe and dread. This was no ordinary hound. It was a colossal, emerald-green fairy dog, said to roam the moors and forests that separated the everyday world from the mystical realm of the Shia. Its arrival was heralded by 3 terrifying barks that could be heard far out at sea, and to hear that third bark was believed to be a death sentence, a direct summons to the other world. The Sith wasn't merely a monster, It was a living, breathing border. Its presence defined the liminal space where the veil between worlds was thinnest, and its role was to patrol that invisible fence, ensuring that only those who were chosen or fated could cross between the realms. It enforced a natural law that some boundaries are not meant for casual passage, teaching communities to approach the supernatural with a mixture of respect and healthy fear. This theme of cosmic guardianship takes a dramatically different form in the vibrant and complex mythology of the Aztecs. Here, the Tzitzitl were not earthly creatures but terrifying star demons, skeletal beings who descended from the heavens during solar eclipses. They served as guardians of a different kind of threshold, not a physical gate or a forest path, but the very cosmic boundary between the ordered world and the primordial chaos that existed before creation. Their duty was to prevent that chaos from rushing back in and unraveling the universe. The Tzitzitl were the ultimate enforcers of cosmic order, a reminder that existence itself is a fragile state that requires constant protection. Their fearsome appearance during an eclipse was a powerful, world-shaking event that reminded everyone of the perpetual battle between light and darkness, order and oblivion. They guarded the most profound threshold of all, the line between being and nothingness. Perhaps one of the oldest recorded encounters with a threshold guardian comes from the ancient Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh. In his quest for eternal fame, the hero Gilgamesh and his wild companion Enkidu journey to the distant cedar forest, a sacred domain of the gods, to slay its monstrous guardian Humbaba. This being was not evil. He was appointed by the god Enlil specifically to protect the forest from the ravages of mortals. Humbaba's very essence was terror. His face was a chaotic mass of intestines, his roar was a flood, his breath was fire, and he was cloaked in 7 radiant auras of divine power. He was the embodiment of the taboo, the ultimate test of whether a human, even a king 2/3 god, had the right to transgress into a divine preserve. To defeat Humbaba, Gilgamesh required not only immense physical courage but also the aid of the sun god Shamash, who struck the guardian down with 13 powerful winds, stripping him of his auras. This myth encapsulates the complex morality of such encounters. The guardian is defeated, but his slaying is also a transgression that angers the gods and brings a heavy price, forcing Gilgamesh to confront his own mortality and the limits of human ambition. Traveling to the mountains of Japan, we find another type of sentinel, the Tengu. These legendary creatures, often depicted as part human, part bird or crow, were fiercely protective guardians of remote mountain passes and deep forests. Originally seen as disruptive demons, their role evolved into that of challenging and testing those who entered their domain, particularly arrogant samurai or prideful Buddhist monks. A Tengu might use its mastery of illusion to lead a traveler astray, trapping them in an endless labyrinth of trees, or it might engage them in a spiritual debate, exposing their vanity and lack of true enlightenment. The Tengu's challenge was rarely about brute force. It was a test of character, humility, and inner worth. To pass a Tengu was to prove you had shed your worldly arrogance and were worthy of proceeding on your spiritual or physical journey through the sacred wilderness. What unites these wildly different beings, from a Scottish fairy hound to a Mesopotamian terror demon, is the profound narrative function they serve. These myths were never just simple campfire stories. They were the ancient world's way of encoding crucial moral and existential lessons. The constant, underlying theme is that any sacred journey, any attempt to cross into a realm of greater power, knowledge, or significance, demands a high price. It requires respect for the boundary itself, humility in the face of a power greater than oneself, and the inner strength to face a challenge that is often tailored to one's greatest weakness. The guardian ensures the treasure is never stolen, the knowledge is never taken lightly, and the passage is never made without transformation. They are the narrative mechanism that turns a simple trip into a heroic quest, teaching each new generation that the most worthwhile destinations in life are always protected by tests that forge a stronger, wiser self. This deep need to protect sacred ground from spiritual contamination was not just an abstract belief, it was physically built into the very stones and pathways of the ancient world. Consider the humble yet powerful Herm, a common sight along the roads and at the crossways of ancient Greece. These were not grand statues but simple stone pillars, often topped with the head of the god Hermes and featuring an erect phallus carved into the base. To our modern eyes, they might seem odd or even crude, but to the Greeks, they were indispensable guardians. Hermes was the god of boundaries, travelers, and communication, the divine psychopomp who guided souls to the underworld. Placing his image at a crossroads, a literal and symbolic point of decision and potential danger, was believed to sanctify that liminal space. A traveler, upon encountering a Herm, might offer a quick prayer or leave a small offering, seeking the god's protection for the journey ahead. These markers transformed anonymous, potentially hazardous intersections into defined, sacred points of reference, ensuring that the paths between communities remained spiritually clean and safe for passage. They were a daily reminder that the world was filled with invisible borders that required acknowledgement and respect. This concept of spiritual hygiene reached its most elaborate and meticulous expression in the tombs and temples of ancient Egypt. For the Egyptians, the journey to the afterlife was the ultimate, most perilous threshold crossing, and it required the most powerful protection imaginable. The pyramids and royal tombs were not just grand monuments, they were fortified spiritual containers designed with one primary goal: to safeguard the deceased pharaoh's soul and his physical body from any and all malevolent forces that might disrupt his voyage to eternity. The walls of the burial chambers were lined with intricate spells from the pyramid texts and later the Book of the Dead. These were not mere decorations, they were functional weapons, incantations to repel demons, passwords to get past hostile gatekeepers in the underworld, and maps to guide the soul through the treacherous landscape of the Duat. Alongside these textual guardians, statues of gods like Anubis, the jackal-headed overseer of mummification, or the fearsome lioness Sekhmet, were placed with deliberate intention. They were believed to be vessels that the deity's protective power could inhabit, acting as eternal sentinels standing watch over the sanctity of the tomb. Every element of the architecture, from the narrow, easily blocked passageways to the false doors and hidden chambers, was a physical manifestation of this deep-seated need for spiritual security. A similar, though visually distinct, tradition flourished across Asia with the Buddhist stupa. These dome-shaped monuments housing sacred relics are themselves representations of the cosmos and the enlightened mind of the Buddha. Guarding the four cardinal directions at the entrances to these sacred sites, one often finds the shishi or temple lions. These formidable, lion-like creatures are typically depicted in pairs, one with its mouth open to pronounce the sacred sound, ah, and the other with its mouth closed to utter the sound, Together, these two sounds form aum, the primal syllable symbolizing the totality of the universe. Their presence is far more than ornamental. The open mouth symbolizes the beginning of all things, the closed mouth their end, and together they represent the entire cycle of existence that the Buddha transcended. By positioning them at the gate, they silently communicate that to enter this holy space is to step toward transcending that very cycle. They guard not against physical thieves but against spiritual ignorance and distraction, ensuring that the space within remains a pure environment for contemplation and reverence. What becomes stunningly clear from these examples is that for ancient cultures, architecture and belief were utterly inseparable. A temple gate was never just an entrance, it was a filter. A tomb was never just a burial place, It was a launchpad for the soul, requiring a clean and protected trajectory. The guardians they employed, whether they were carved statues, inscribed spells, or symbolic animals, were active components of this spiritual technology. Their primary function was apotropaic, meaning they were designed to ward off evil. They served as a form of supernatural pest control, repelling chaotic forces and malevolent intentions that could corrupt the sacred energy of a place. This practice of embedding protection directly into the environment allowed people to interact with the divine with a sense of safety and order. It created a defined sacred geography where the faithful could cross the ultimate thresholds, approaching the realms of gods, ancestors, and higher states of consciousness, confident that the space had been properly prepared and guarded for such a profound encounter. These profound encounters with guardians were not confined to grand myths or temple gates. They were brought into the very heart of community life through powerful rituals of initiation. In these ceremonies, the threshold guardian was not a distant legend but an immediate, personal experience designed to forge a new identity. Across countless cultures, the journey from childhood to adulthood, from layperson to priest, or from novice to master was framed as a perilous crossing, and a guardian stood squarely in the middle of that path. Its purpose was to serve as the ultimate test of worthiness, a final exam for the soul that determined if an individual was truly prepared to leave their old self behind and step into a new role with all its rights and responsibilities. This transformed the guardian from a mere obstacle into a sacred mechanism for personal alchemy, where the very act of confrontation was what purified and prepared the initiate for what came next. One of the most famous examples of this comes from ancient Greece, the Eleusinian Mysteries. This was a secretive, annual initiation rite dedicated to the goddesses Demeter and Persephone, promising initiates a blessed afterlife. The details were closely guarded, but we know the journey to the sacred site at Eleusis was a central part of the process. Before being granted access to the innermost sanctum and its profound secrets, participants would face a series of symbolic challenges and ordeals. While we don't have a specific named monster like Cerberus, the entire process was guarded by the threat of failure and exclusion. There were passwords to learn, rituals to perform correctly, and a psychological gauntlet to run. The guardians here were the priests and the rituals themselves acting as proxies for the divine, testing the initiate's commitment, purity, and resolve. To pass these tests was to prove oneself worthy of the transformative knowledge within, a knowledge that fundamentally changed one's understanding of life and death. The guardian ensured that this powerful transformation was not given lightly, but was earned through a demonstrated readiness to receive it. This pattern of a guarded initiation is perhaps even more vividly illustrated in shamanic traditions found from Siberia to the Amazon. The journey to become a shaman is never a simple choice. It is often a calling that comes through a crisis, such as a severe illness or a powerful vision. In this altered state, the aspiring shaman's spirit is said to travel to other worlds, and this journey is invariably populated by spirit guardians. These entities might appear as powerful animal spirits, a bear, a jaguar, or an eagle, or as ancestral figures. Their role is to challenge the traveler. They might attack, demand a test of courage, or offer teachings only to those who can understand them. To gain the power to heal, the shaman must first overcome these spiritual sentinels, sometimes by battling them, other times by earning their respect and forming an alliance. The shaman doesn't destroy these guardians, they befriend and integrate their power, turning a potential enemy into a spirit guide. This process perfectly encapsulates the guardian's dual role. It is both the barrier to entry and the very source of the power one seeks to acquire. You don't just get past the guardian, you must learn from it and incorporate its lesson to succeed. On a broader social level, these initiation rituals served a crucial function in reinforcing the hierarchy and stability of a community. By making advancement contingent on overcoming a challenge, the society ensured that its leaders, healers, and warriors were genuinely the most capable, courageous, or devout individuals. It prevented roles from being inherited or claimed through mere privilege. The guardian, whether a physical test of endurance, a spiritual ordeal, or a complex riddle, acted as a great equalizer and a quality control mechanism. It weeded out the unprepared, the insincere, and the weak-willed, ensuring that only those who had truly internalized the values and strength required for the new status could cross the threshold. This made the resulting hierarchy seem legitimate and earned, not arbitrary. The elder was respected because they had survived the initiation. The shaman was trusted because they had wrestled with spirits and won. The guardian legitimized the entire social and spiritual order by making elevation a matter of proven merit. This ancient, archetypal understanding of the guardian as a test of worthiness is far from a relic of the past. It lives on in our modern language and in the metaphors we use to describe personal growth. When we talk about facing our demons, conquering our fears, or breaking through a barrier, we are invoking the same essential idea. The demon is our personal threshold guardian. The barrier is the liminal space we must cross. We intuitively understand that to achieve a major goal, to recover from an addiction, to build a successful business, to commit to a relationship, we will inevitably face a profound internal challenge. This is our own psyche's initiation rite. The anxiety that whispers we will fail, the laziness that tempts us to quit, the old trauma that holds us back, these are the modern forms of the spirit guardian blocking the path. They test our resolve, our courage, and our worthiness to step into a new, better version of ourselves. The guardian ensures that our transformations are earned, making them meaningful and permanent. It teaches us that the most valuable things in life, self-respect, wisdom, inner strength, always lie on the other side of a challenge we must prove ourselves ready to face. This powerful bridge between ancient myth and modern self-understanding was masterfully built by the Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung, who saw these timeless guardians not as external monsters, but as profound mirrors reflecting the deepest, often hidden parts of ourselves. Jung identified what he called archetypes universal, primal patterns of behavior and imagery that reside in what he termed the collective unconscious, a kind of psychological inheritance shared by all humanity. Within this framework, the threshold guardian emerges as a powerful manifestation of one of the most crucial archetypes, the shadow. The shadow is not a monster in the closet. It is the sum of all the parts of our personality that we, or our society, have deemed unacceptable, weak, or shameful. It's the repository for our repressed anger, our hidden desires, our selfish impulses, our vulnerabilities, and all the traits we consciously try to suppress in order to present a polished, acceptable face to the world. We push these aspects down into the darkness of our unconscious, but they do not disappear. Instead, they gather energy and power, often emerging in our lives as projections onto others, as sudden uncontrollable outbursts, or as the very obstacles that stand in our way when we try to move forward. When you encounter a threshold guardian in a dream, perhaps a frightening figure blocking a doorway, a wild animal chasing you, or a mysterious stranger demanding something you don't have, Jung would argue you are having a direct confrontation with your own shadow. That menacing figure at the door isn't trying to keep you out of a physical house. It is symbolically blocking your path to a new stage of psychological development because you are not yet whole. You have not acknowledged the part of yourself that the guardian represents. The dragon isn't just a dragon. It is the terrifying embodiment of a rage you've refused to acknowledge, a passion you've been too afraid to pursue, or a power you feel unworthy to wield. To simply try to slay this internal dragon is to make a critical mistake. Jungian psychology suggests the goal is not annihilation but integration. You must turn and face the creature, understand its nature and ultimately find a way to bring its energy under your conscious guidance. Overcoming the guardian means accepting that this feared aspect is in fact a part of you, and by welcoming it back into your psyche, you reclaim the vital energy you had been using to keep it locked away. This arduous process of facing, understanding, and integrating these disowned parts is the heart of what Jung called individuation, the lifelong journey toward becoming a complete, indivisible individual, your true and authentic self. Individuation is not about becoming perfect, it is about becoming whole, embracing both the light and the dark within. The threshold guardian is the indispensable gatekeeper to this process. Its very presence signifies that a major step in your personal growth is available, but it is conditional. The guardian demands that you acknowledge what you have been avoiding before you can pass. Each time you successfully integrate a piece of your shadow, you don't just defeat a guardian, you essentially befriend it, and its power becomes yours. The anger you integrated becomes healthy assertiveness. The creativity you feared becomes inspired action. The vulnerability you hid becomes authentic connection. You haven't destroyed a part of yourself, you have liberated it, and in doing so, you have expanded your own being. This psychological interpretation doesn't dismiss the ancient myths, it reveals their deeper, enduring wisdom. It explains why the story of a hero battling a dragon or outwitting a sphinx has resonated so powerfully for thousands of years. These are not just entertaining tales of external adventure, they are accurate maps of the internal landscape of human growth. They are allegories for the inner work every single person must do. The mythical guardian guarding a treasure in a cave is a perfect symbol for your own untapped potential, which is always guarded by your deepest fears and insecurities. The treasure, whether it's self-confidence, creative fulfillment, or inner peace, cannot be seized until you first confront the guardian you yourself placed there. This Jungian perspective makes these ancient stories urgently relevant to our lives today. That feeling of being stuck in your career, that recurring argument in your relationship, that anxiety that stops you from pursuing a dream, these are all modern-day threshold guardians. They are the personalized manifestations of your shadow, showing up in your daily life to test you, to challenge you, and ultimately to force you to grow. By recognizing them for what they are, we can stop seeing ourselves as victims of external circumstances and start embracing the heroic journey of our own individuation, understanding that every barrier is an invitation to become more whole. While grand myths spoke of cosmic boundaries and heroic quests, the concept of the guardian was brought down to earth and woven into the very fabric of daily life through local folklore. In villages and rural communities across the world, the threshold guardian became a deeply personal and immediate presence, a folkloric figure assigned to watch over the boundaries that defined ordinary existence. These were not the gates to the underworld or the doors of celestial palaces. They were the edges of the village, the line where the cultivated fields met the wild woods, the old stone bridge over a rushing stream, and most intimately, the doorway to one's own home. This localization of the guardian archetype transformed it from a subject of priestly ritual into a tool of communal wisdom, a character in stories told by the hearth to explain the world and manage the behavior of the young and the reckless. Consider the domovoi, a beloved figure in Slavic folklore. This was no terrifying monster but a household spirit, a small, often bearded, grandfatherly figure who lived behind the stove or in the threshold of the home itself. The domovoi was the ultimate domestic guardian, fiercely protective of the family it adopted. It would warn of impending misfortune by knocking or weeping, help with chores at night, and care for the livestock. But its protection was conditional on respect. A messy home, loud arguments, or disrespectful behavior could anger the domovoi, causing it to pinch people in their sleep, hide belongings, or even sabotage the family's prosperity. This folklore created a powerful feedback loop. The home was a sacred space that required order and harmony to keep its guardian content. The domovoi wasn't just a story. It was a narrative embodiment of the principle that a well-kept and respectful household was a safe and prosperous one, making the abstract idea of domestic bliss something tangible that could be nurtured or offended. This theme of nature's watchful presence was masterfully carved into the very architecture of rural England in the form of the Green Man. Found adorning the portals and roof bosses of medieval churches, this enigmatic face is surrounded by or even disgorging lush foliage, leaves and vines spilling from its mouth. While scholars debate his precise origins, his placement at the entrance to sacred spaces is profoundly significant. The Green Man represents the untamed, raw power of the natural world, literally framing the doorway to the structured, divine order of the church. He is a permanent reminder that the wilderness is not separate from the divine, but is itself a manifestation of it. As a threshold guardian, his message is one of balance and respect. To enter the church, one passed under his gaze, acknowledging that the spiritual sanctuary within was built from and existed alongside the powerful, sometimes frightening, forces of nature outside. He guarded the transition from the wildwood to the pew, ensuring that congregants did not forget the source of their sustenance and the primal power that preceded stone walls and scripture. Perhaps the most potent examples of folkloric guardians are those that served a starkly practical purpose, keeping people, especially children, away from very real physical danger. The Scottish Kelpie is a perfect embodiment of this function. This shape-shifting water spirit most often appeared as a beautiful, seemingly tame horse grazing near the banks of deep, fast-moving rivers. Its back was enticingly slippery, and its mane might be tangled with water weeds. To a child or a careless traveler, it looked like an easy ride, but to climb upon its back was to be sealed to it by a powerful adhesive magic. The Kelpie would then gallop directly into the deepest part of the water, drowning its rider. This terrifying tale was not just a spooky story. It was a critical safety lesson repeated in every community near dangerous waterways. The Kelpie was a narrative safety rail. It gave a name, a face, and a dreadful consequence to a hidden hazard, making the abstract danger of drowning rivers into a tangible monster to be avoided. It taught respect for the power of nature in the most memorable way possible, ensuring that the community's most vulnerable members understood the literal life and death importance of certain boundaries. These stories, passed down through generations not in written texts but through oral tradition, were a form of communal wisdom technology. They were the ancient equivalent of safety pamphlets, moral instruction manuals, and environmental stewardship guides all rolled into one. By personalizing the concept of a guardian, making it a household spirit, a leafy face in the church wall, or a deadly water horse, ordinary people democratized the idea of sacred boundaries. Everyone, not just kings and priests, had thresholds that needed guarding. Every home, every bridge, every forest path could be a site of negotiation between safety and danger, respect and transgression. These folkloric guardians blended superstition with profound everyday wisdom, using the power of narrative to enforce social norms, protect the vulnerable, and instill a deep-seated respect for the limits that kept a community intact and safe. They prove that the most enduring myths are not always about gods and heroes, but often about the simple, vital lessons of how to live wisely within the boundaries of our world. Moving from the realm of story and ritual, we find that this profound human need to mark and protect a boundary was literally set in stone, carved into the very walls and gateways of our most important structures. This is where the concept of the threshold guardian transitions from a fleeting spirit in a tale to a permanent, tangible presence in our daily environment. Artisans and architects across the ages have masterfully translated these protective beings into physical form, embedding them into the skin of our buildings to create a constant, silent dialogue between the community and the sacred. These architectural guardians are a fascinating blend of pure imagination and utterly practical function, proving that for our ancestors, the spiritual and the mundane were never truly separate. Consider the iconic gargoyles perched high atop the soaring spires of medieval European cathedrals. To the modern eye, they might seem like grotesque monsters added for dramatic flair, but their role was deeply intentional and surprisingly practical. These stone creatures are, in fact, brilliantly designed waterspouts, channeling rainwater away from the delicate masonry of the building to prevent erosion. But their function extended far beyond mere drainage. Their grotesque and often terrifying forms were believed to actively ward off evil spirits. The logic was apotropaic, the practice of using imagery to turn away harm. By placing these frightening figures on the exterior of a holy place, the architects were creating a first line of defense. They believed that malevolent spirits, upon seeing a stone demon even more fearsome than themselves, would be frightened away, leaving the sanctified space within pure and protected. The gargoyle is a perfect example of this duality, a practical solution to a physical problem that is simultaneously a powerful spiritual guardian, its open mouth spewing not just rain but a symbolic defiance against chaos. This practice of pairing guardians at an entrance is a global phenomenon, beautifully illustrated by the majestic food dogs that flank the gates of Chinese temples, palaces, and important homes. Known more formally as imperial guardian lions, these powerful statues are always presented in a pair. One, typically the male, is shown with his right paw resting upon a decorated ball, symbolizing his dominion over the world and the unity of the empire. The other, a female, restrains a playful cub beneath her left paw, representing nurture and the cycle of life. Their poses are dynamic and powerful, their expressions fierce and watchful. Their presence at a threshold is unmistakable. They denote protection, authority, and prestige. They are not merely decorative, they are a clear announcement that the space beyond is significant, guarded, and requires respect. To pass between them is to consciously move from a profane space into a sacred or empowered one, under the watchful eyes of these powerful stone protectors. Traveling to Southeast Asia, we encounter another serpentine form of architectural guardianship, the Naga. These mythical beings, often depicted as great multi-headed cobras, are a ubiquitous feature of temples in Cambodia, Thailand, and Laos. They are most dramatically presented in the form of Naga balustrades, long, elegant stone railings that line the causeways leading to temple entrances. The Naga's bodies form the rail itself, while their multiple heads flare up like a hooded canopy at the beginning of the walkway. This design transforms the approach to the temple into a symbolic journey. As a devotee walks across the causeway, they are effectively passing out of the mundane world over the body of the Naga and into the sacred realm of the temple. The Naga represents the bridge between the earthly and the divine, and its watchful presence ensures that this transition is made with reverence and under protection. It is architecture as narrative, guiding the pilgrim physically and spiritually toward enlightenment. This symbolic integration reaches back to the very foundations of ancient Mesoamerican civilization. The great pyramids of cultures like the Maya and the Aztecs were not just tombs or temples. They were conceptual mountains, acting as bridges between the earthly realm and the celestial world of the gods. Adorning the steep stairways of these pyramids, one frequently finds elaborate serpent motifs. The most striking example is the feathered serpent god, known as Kukulkan to the Maya and Quetzalcoatl to the Aztecs. Its carved head often projects from the base of the balustrades, with its stone body stretching up the side of the staircase. During the equinoxes, a play of light and shadow would create the illusion of a giant serpent slithering down the pyramid, a breathtaking moment of architectural magic that blurred the line between building and living myth. These serpents were the ultimate guardians of the celestial gateway, their presence defining the pyramid not just as a structure of stone, but as a living, breathing portal to the heavens, fiercely protected from unworthy trespass. This ancient impulse to embed guardians into our architecture is not a relic confined to history books. If you look closely, you can find its echoes in our modern built environment. While we may not carve dragons into our skyscrapers, we still utilize symbolic elements to mark transitions and convey a sense of safety or importance. Think of the massive, ornate doors of a historic bank building, flanked by imposing pillars or stone eagles, architectural features designed to subconsciously communicate strength, security, and permanence. Even a simple, well-defined archway over a garden path or a pair of lights illuminating a front door serves a similar, if subdued, purpose. It marks a transition from one space to another, creating a psychological threshold. This continuity shows that our fundamental desire to define, protect, and sanctify our spaces through design is a timeless principle. The stones and styles may change, but the human need to feel that our transitions are watched over, that our boundaries are meaningful, continues to shape the world we build around us. Of all the thresholds we cross in our lifetime, none is more profound, more universal, or more shrouded in mystery than the final one, the passage from life into death. It is the ultimate unknown, the great frontier that every culture has sought to map with myth, ritual, and belief. And standing at this most sacred of crossings are some of the most powerful and evocative threshold guardians of all beings, specifically tasked with overseeing the soul's journey into whatever lies beyond. These guardians of death's doorway serve a dual purpose that is both terrifying and comforting. They are the final judges of a life lived and the ultimate guides through the greatest transition we will ever face. In ancient Egypt, this concept was woven into the very fabric of their elaborate beliefs about the afterlife, centered on a ceremony of divine judgment that was both meticulous and deeply symbolic. The central figure in this drama was Anubis, the jackal-headed god. His canine association was no accident. Jackals were scavengers seen prowling the edges of cemeteries, and so Anubis became naturally linked with the protection of the dead. But his role was far more nuanced than simply guarding a tomb. He was the psychopomp, the guide who led the deceased through the treacherous underworld to the Hall of Judgment. There, in a moment of breathtaking solemnity, he would perform the weighing of the heart ceremony. The heart of the deceased, believed to be the seat of the soul and a record of all one's actions in life, was placed on a scale balanced against the feather of Maat, the goddess of truth, justice, and cosmic order. If the heart was heavy with sin and wrongdoing, it would sink, and the soul would be devoured by the monstrous goddess Ammit, a creature part lion, part hippopotamus, and part crocodile, ceasing to exist. But if the heart was as light as the feather, proving a life lived in truth and balance, the soul would be presented to Osiris and granted eternal life in the field of reeds. This entire process, with Anubis as its master of ceremonies, transformed death from a chaotic end into an orderly, moral audit. The guardian here was not an obstacle to be overcome by force, but a judge to be satisfied by the quality of one's character. A different kind of negotiation awaited souls in the gloomy underworld of Greek myth. Here, the first guardian encountered was not a judge but a tollkeeper, Charon, the aged, grim ferryman. His domain was the river Styx, the dark, foul waters that formed the impermeable boundary between the world of the living and the kingdom of Hades. For a soul to cross, Charon demanded an abal, a small coin. This belief was so concrete that the ancient Greeks practiced a specific funerary rite. A coin was placed in the mouth or on the eyes of the deceased before burial, their final fare for this crucial journey. A soul without the coin was doomed to wander the barren shores for 100 years, a lost and restless spirit. Charon's role introduces a fascinatingly pragmatic element to the threshold of death. His concern is not morality, but a simple transactional fee. He underscores a universal anxiety that even in death, passage might require proper preparation and the observance of specific rituals by the living. He is a guardian who can be appeased not by a virtuous life, but by a practical, earthly provision, making him a deeply human and relatable figure in the pantheon of death deities. Perhaps the most intense and dynamic confrontation with post-mortem guardians comes from Tibetan Buddhism, with its intricate teachings on the Bardo. The Bardo is an intermediate, transitional state that consciousness enters after death, a liminal plane of existence that can last up to 49 days before rebirth. This period is described as a tumultuous journey through a landscape of overwhelming visions and sounds. Throughout this ordeal, the deceased encounter what are known as the Dakamas, or wrathful deities. These beings appear in terrifying forms, surrounded by flames, wielding terrifying weapons, and emitting thunderous roars. Their horrific appearance, however, is a profound illusion, a projection of the deceased's own karma and unresolved mental states. Each wrathful deity is actually a mirror, a manifestation of a purified form of wisdom, testing the soul's ability to recognize its true nature. If the consciousness reacts with fear and aversion, it flees, which only leads it toward less favorable realms of rebirth. But if, through spiritual training practiced in life, the soul can recognize these terrifying visions as emanations of its own mind and meet them with fearless compassion and understanding, it can achieve liberation from the cycle of rebirth altogether. Here, the guardians are the ultimate personal test. They are not external judges or ferrymen. They are the very contents of one's own consciousness, making the journey through the Bardo the most intimate and demanding of all possible confrontations. What unites these vastly different traditions, the judgment of Anubis, the toll of Charon, and the terrifying visions of the Bardo, is a profound human need to impose structure and meaning onto the void of death. The unknown is terrifying, but a guardian, even a fearsome one, makes that unknown knowable. It provides a roadmap for the soul and a set of rules for the living. This belief system offered immense comfort. It meant that death was not a chaotic disintegration, but a process with rules, guides, and a destination. Furthermore, it served a powerful ethical function for society. The knowledge that one would ultimately be judged by Anubis, or that one's own uncontrolled emotions would manifest as wrathful deities, reinforced the importance of living a moral, conscious, and intentional life. How one faced these final guardians was a direct consequence of how one had lived, turning abstract morality into a matter of ultimate consequence. These stories gave weight to human actions, suggesting that the choices we make every day are, in fact, a form of preparation for the most important journey we will ever take, with the final outcome resting on a moment of truth at the threshold of eternity. This ancient archetype of the guarded gateway has not faded into obscurity. It has simply shape-shifted, finding powerful new life in the stories we tell today. Our books, films, and video games are now the primary repositories for these timeless figures, proving that the human psyche still craves the structure and meaning they provide. In J.R.R. Tolkien's epic The Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship's journey into the darkness of the mines of Moria is violently halted by the Balrog, a being of ancient shadow and flame. It is more than a mere monster. It is the literal and spiritual guardian of that deep, forgotten place. Its presence on the bridge of Khazad-dûm creates an impossible choice: turn back from their path or face a primal force of destruction. This is a classic threshold guardian moment, demanding immense courage and sacrifice to cross. Similarly, in the world of Harry Potter, the first major obstacle protecting the Philosopher's Stone is Fluffy, a gigantic three-headed dog. While a more direct homage to the Cerberus of myth, Fluffy serves the same narrative function. He blocks the trapdoor, the entrance to the challenges below, and overcoming him requires not brute force but the specific knowledge of how to lull him to sleep with music. This modern twist reinforces the ancient idea that passing a guardian is not always about violence. It is about applying wisdom, preparation, and the right tool for the test. What is fascinating about these contemporary guardians is how faithfully they retain their core mythological DNA. They are not arbitrary roadblocks inserted for cheap tension. They are narrative crucibles designed to force a character to prove they possess the specific quality needed to proceed on their journey. The Balrog tests raw, desperate courage. Fluffy tests cleverness and preparation. In the video game The Legend of Zelda, players constantly encounter locked doors, formidable enemies, or impassable terrain that can only be bypassed after acquiring a new item or skill. These are the interactive guardians of the digital age, gatekeeping progress until the player hero has grown in power and ability. This pattern is so pervasive because it mirrors our own understanding of growth. We instinctively know that you cannot solve a complex problem without first learning the necessary skills, or overcome a deep fear without first mustering the required courage. These modern stories simply externalize that internal process, giving it a face and a form we can engage with from the safety of a page or a screen. But the influence of these archetypes extends far beyond the realm of fiction and into the very fabric of our daily lives. Each of us constantly encounters modern-day threshold guardians. They just wear different disguises, that daunting panel of interviewers for your dream job. They are guardians testing your worthiness to cross into a new career. A serious medical diagnosis can feel like a terrifying gatekeeper, blocking your path to your former healthy life and demanding resilience, patience, and a new kind of strength to move forward. The end of a significant relationship stands as a sentinel at the gateway to a new, unknown chapter of your life, challenging you to process grief and rediscover yourself before you can pass. Even smaller transitions, like moving to a new city or starting a difficult conversation, are guarded by anxiety and self-doubt, the internalized spirits that question our readiness and resolve. This profound continuity reveals something essential about the human mind. We are hardwired for narrative. We understand our lives not as a random sequence of events, but as an ongoing story of challenges, growth, and transformation. The ancient archetype of the threshold guardian provides a powerful and comforting framework for this. It allows us to reframe a terrifying obstacle not as a meaningless hardship, but as a necessary test within our personal heroic journey. This shift in perspective is incredibly empowering. It transforms a passive experience of suffering into an active quest for growth. That difficult boss isn't just a tormentor. They are the guardian you must outsmart or overcome with integrity to earn your professional advancement. That period of depression isn't just a void, it's a dark forest you must navigate, facing its shadowy guardians to emerge with deeper self-knowledge. By recognizing these patterns, we tap into an ancient well of wisdom, learning to approach our own modern thresholds with the same mindset that heroes have always used, not with a wish to avoid the challenge, but with the determination to meet it, learn from it, and prove ourselves worthy of the transformation that lies on the other side. This powerful narrative pattern of facing a guardian at a crucial crossroads wasn't just a recurring accident in global mythology. It was identified and mapped as a fundamental pillar of human storytelling by the 20th century mythologist Joseph Campbell. In his groundbreaking work, Campbell analyzed myths from every corner of the world and discovered a common underlying structure he called the monomyth, or more popularly, the hero's journey. This universal story template describes the typical adventure of a hero who ventures out from their ordinary world into a region of supernatural wonder, encounters fabulous forces, wins a decisive victory and returns home transformed. And standing squarely at one of the most pivotal moments in this journey, the point of departure from the known into the unknown, is the archetypal threshold guardian. Campbell pinpointed this stage as a non-negotiable part of the heroic transformation. After the hero receives their initial call to adventure, they inevitably arrive at the threshold of the new world, and it is here that they encounter the guardians of that gateway. Campbell was careful to note that these entities are not always monstrous enemies. They can appear in many forms, as loyal soldiers simply doing their job to protect a border, as a seemingly hostile beast that must be outwitted, or even as a potential ally who first tests the hero's resolve. Their core function, regardless of their appearance, is to block the hero's easy passage. They exist to force a moment of crisis, a test of commitment that asks the hero a simple but profound question. Are you truly sure you want to do this? Are you ready to leave your old life behind and face the unimaginable dangers and wonders that lie ahead? This moment of confrontation separates the curious from the committed, ensuring that only those with the necessary courage, cleverness, or purity of purpose are allowed to proceed on the transformative path. A perfect modern illustration of this is found in the opening act of Star Wars. When we first meet Luke Skywalker, he is a frustrated farm boy, dreaming of adventure but tethered to his mundane duties on Tatooine. His call to adventure arrives in the form of a cryptic message stored inside the droid R2-D2. To pursue it, he seeks out the hermit Ben Kenobi. At first glance, Ben is a kindly old man, but in the structure of the hero's journey, he initially serves as a threshold guardian. He holds the knowledge Luke seeks the message from Princess Leia, but he doesn't simply hand it over. He tests Luke, he reveals the truth about his father, introduces the dangerous concept of the Force, and presents a seemingly insane proposal to travel to Alderaan and join a rebellion. Luke initially balks, refusing the call and wanting to return home to his aunt and uncle. It is only after his home is violently destroyed, severing his ties to his ordinary world, that he fully accepts the challenge and is permitted to cross the threshold with Ben as his guide. Ben transforms from a guardian into a mentor, but his initial role was absolutely crucial. He was the first major obstacle that forced Luke to consciously choose his path toward becoming a hero. Campbell's genius was in recognizing that this narrative device is far more than a simple plot obstacle. The threshold guardian, he argued, is a symbolic representation of the status quo's inherent resistance to change. Every system, whether it's a society, a family, or an individual's psyche, has a natural inertia, a desire to remain in a stable, known state. The guardian embodies this inertia. It is the collective voice of fear, doubt, and comfort that screams at the hero to turn back, to be reasonable, to stay safe. By overcoming the guardian, the hero isn't just defeating an external foe. They are achieving a vital internal victory over their own reservations and the limiting beliefs of their old world. This act of overcoming is the first true step in their metamorphosis, proving they possess the will to break from the past and venture into a new state of being. This framework, articulated so clearly by Campbell, gave writers and filmmakers a powerful tool for crafting resonant stories. It explains why narratives from The Matrix, where Neo must choose between the red pill and the blue pill under Morpheus's challenging gaze, to The Wizard of Oz, where Dorothy must get past the intimidating gatekeeper of the Emerald City, feel so instinctively satisfying. They are all tapping into this ancient, deep-seated archetype. The pattern connects a modern sci-fi epic to an ancient Mesopotamian poem, revealing a shared understanding of human psychology that transcends time and culture. The Threshold Guardian ensures that the hero's journey is never easy, that transformation is always earned, and that the story reflects our own universal struggle between the safety of the familiar and the irresistible pull of exploration and growth. The forms these guardians take are never arbitrary. They are a profound reflection of the societies that imagined them, especially when it comes to how cultures assign gender to concepts of power, challenge, and protection. This gendering of the guardian archetype offers a fascinating lens through which to view historical attitudes toward strength, wisdom, and the very nature of the tests we must face. Often, the most immediately recognizable guardians are those that embody a traditionally masculine ideal of raw, confrontational power. Think of the Minotaur, the bull-headed beast of Greek myth, trapped in the heart of the labyrinth. It does not reason or seduce. Its challenge is purely physical, a test of sheer strength and combat prowess that heroes like Theseus must meet with violence. Similarly, the Norse Jotun, or giants, are frequently portrayed as immense, brutish forces of nature guarding the borders of the gods' realms. Their threat is one of overwhelming physicality, and overcoming them typically requires a corresponding display of martial skill and heroic force. These masculine-coded guardians represent a worldview where the primary obstacle to progress is external, tangible, and must be dominated through direct confrontation, mirroring cultural values that prized martial heroism and physical conquest as the highest forms of achievement. In stark contrast, many traditions feature guardians who wield a more traditionally feminine and often far more insidious form of power. These beings rarely rely on brute force. Their strength lies in allure, deception, or profound wisdom that targets the mind and spirit rather than the body. The Greek sirens are a classic example. Perched on their rocky island, they did not attack passing ships with claw or tooth. Instead, they used the irresistible power of their song to enchant sailors, luring them to their doom by appealing to their deepest desires and curiosities. To pass this threshold required not a sword, but unwavering willpower and the wisdom to resist temptation, often achieved through the clever stratagem of stopping one's own ears or being bound to the mast. From Slavic folklore emerged the Rusalka, water spirits often depicted as the ghosts of wronged women. They guard forest pools and riverbanks, not with violence, but with a haunting beauty and a captivating song that draws travelers into the depths. Their challenge is an emotional and psychological one, rooted in themes of tragedy, desire, and the consequences of past misdeeds. Overcoming such a guardian demands emotional intelligence, respect, and perhaps an offering of compassion, rather than a show of physical strength. Perhaps most illuminating are the traditions that consciously blend these gendered concepts into a single, unified form, suggesting a more integrated understanding of power. In Hindu philosophy, this is magnificently expressed through the deity Ardhanarishvara, a composite androgynous form of the god Shiva and his consort Parvati. This single figure is literally split down the middle, one half male and the other half female, symbolizing the inseparable union of masculine and feminine energies within the universe and within the self. As a conceptual guardian, Ardhanarishvara represents the ultimate balanced threshold. To pass this guardian is not to choose between force and wisdom, or between confrontation and allure, but to recognize that all these qualities are part of a harmonious whole. This form teaches that true power and complete being arise from the integration of all aspects of self, and that the most significant thresholds in life require us to draw upon a full spectrum of strengths, not just those society might label as masculine or feminine. This incredible diversity in representation reveals a profound truth about the human experience of challenge. There is no single, correct way to face a barrier or navigate a transition. The specific nature of the guardian reflects the specific nature of the test. A masculine-coded guardian of brute force might be appropriate for a threshold that requires the courage to stand one's ground in a physical or political conflict. A feminine-coded guardian of allure and wisdom might guard a threshold of spiritual awakening or creative breakthrough, where the danger is distraction, ego, or self-deception. And an androgynous guardian symbolizes those life-changing transitions that demand our entire, integrated being, body, mind, and spirit working in concert. By gendering these challenges, ancient cultures were creating a rich vocabulary for the different kinds of strength we need to cultivate. They were acknowledging that some battles are fought with swords, but others are won with song, with patience, with cunning, or with a quiet, compassionate heart. This nuanced understanding greatly enriches the archetype, showing us that the guardians we meet, whether in myth or in our own lives, are not just obstacles to be beaten, but teachers offering specific lessons on how to become more complete and capable beings as we cross into the unknown. Our journey through the world of threshold guardians now takes a fascinating turn inward, into the private theater of the sleeping mind. For it is in our dreams that these archetypal sentinels make some of their most personal and revealing appearances, not as stone statues or mythical beasts, but as potent symbols crafted by our own subconscious. The landscapes of our dreams are rich with liminal spaces, locked doors we cannot open, bridges that stretch over dark chasms, mysterious corridors that lead to the unknown. And standing watch over these internal thresholds are the unique guardians of our psyche, manifesting as everything from a menacing animal blocking our path to a silent, intimidating figure who simply will not let us pass. These are not random images, they are a deeply personal mythology, a symbolic language our mind uses to represent the very real barriers we face in our waking lives, giving form to our anxieties, our repressed desires, and our resistance to change. The pioneering work of psychoanalysts like Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung gave us the first maps to navigate this mysterious terrain. Freud saw dreams primarily as the royal road to the unconscious, where repressed wishes and unresolved conflicts from our past are disguised in symbolic form to protect the sleeping ego. In his view, a dream of being chased by a monster might be a coded representation of a repressed childhood fear or an unacknowledged desire. The threshold guardian in this context becomes a censoring force, a symbolic blockage that prevents a troubling thought from surfacing directly into consciousness. It's the mind's way of both hinting at and hiding a deep-seated conflict, creating a puzzle that must be decoded to understand the root of the issue. For Freud, overcoming this dream guardian was about bringing the repressed material into the light of day, thus disarming its power over us. Jung, however, took this interpretation a step further into the realm of the archetypal. He agreed that these dream figures symbolized parts of ourselves, but he saw them not merely as censors of repressed trauma, but as essential agents of growth. For Jung, the terrifying figure at the dream's threshold, whether it appears as a dragon, a stern parent, or a locked gate, is a powerful manifestation of the shadow. This is the part of our personality that we have rejected or hidden away because it doesn't align with our conscious self-image. This dream guardian doesn't exist to simply block us. Its presence is an invitation to a crucial confrontation. It challenges us to acknowledge and integrate these disowned aspects of ourselves, whether it's our anger, our vulnerability, or our untapped power. In this light, a recurring dream about trying to open a locked door isn't just about frustration. It's about a part of your life or your own potential that you feel is inaccessible, and the guardian is the symbolic representation of whatever is holding the key. We can see this play out in common dream scenarios. Dreaming of a massive, insurmountable wall often points to a feeling of resistance in your waking life, perhaps an internal barrier of self-doubt that is preventing you from pursuing a new opportunity, or an external obstacle you perceive as too solid to break through. The wall is the guardian, and its message is about the perceived impossibility of the crossing. Conversely, dreaming of a friendly guide, a wise animal, a known mentor, or even a comforting stranger who helps you find a hidden path or open a difficult door can be a tremendously positive sign. This benevolent guardian symbolizes your own inner readiness and the emerging parts of your psyche that are equipped to help you navigate the transition. It suggests that on some level you possess the resources and wisdom needed to move forward, even if your waking mind is filled with doubt. Engaging with these nocturnal guardians through the practice of dream interpretation effectively turns your inner world into a training ground for personal threshold crossing. By learning the symbolic language of your own subconscious, you gain a powerful tool for self-diagnosis. A recurring dream about a flooded road blocking your path might lead you to explore whether you're feeling emotionally overwhelmed in your daily life. A dream about being unable to find the right key for a lock could prompt you to ask what solution or skill is currently eluding you in a waking dilemma. This process connects the ancient, external lore of guardians protecting sacred spaces with the modern, internal pursuit of self-help and personal development. It suggests that the same archetypal forces that ancient cultures projected onto temple gates and mountain passes are alive and well within us, acting out the same dramas of protection, challenge, and transformation on the intimate stage of our dream lives. By paying attention to these internal sentinels, we honor the timeless human experience of standing at a boundary, and we equip ourselves with the insight needed to finally, courageously cross over. Confronting a threshold guardian didn't always mean drawing a sword or solving a riddle. Often, the wisest and most common strategy was one of respectful negotiation. Across countless cultures, people developed a sophisticated toolkit of rituals, offerings, and symbolic charms designed not to defeat these powerful sentinels, but to appease them, to earn their favor, and to peacefully secure safe passage. This approach reveals a deeply pragmatic side of spirituality, one that understood the value of diplomacy when facing a force greater than oneself. In ancient Rome, this practice was woven into the very fabric of daily domestic life. Every household had its lararium, a small shrine dedicated to the lares, who were the protective guardian spirits of the home and hearth. These weren't distant, Olympian gods, but intimate, family-specific deities who watched over the boundary between the home and the outside world. Each day, the head of the household might offer them a portion of the family meal, a few grains of salt, a bit of wine, or a small cake, accompanied by a prayer for the family's continued health and prosperity. This regular offering was less a grand religious ceremony and more a routine act of maintenance, a way to keep the relationship with these domestic guardians strong and positive, ensuring they remained benevolent protectors rather than neglectful or offended spirits. This same principle of offering tribute before crossing a boundary is vividly alive in Hindu tradition. Before entering a temple, a devotee will first pause at the gate, where massive, sculpted Devarapalas stand watch. These formidable door guardians are not merely decorative, they are considered active, divine presences. It is customary to offer them a gesture of respect, a few flower petals, a sprinkle of water, or the light from a small oil lamp before proceeding inward to worship the main deity. This act acknowledges a crucial spiritual hierarchy. You cannot approach the divine without first showing proper respect to its gatekeepers. It's a ritual that transforms the Devarapalas from potential obstacles into honored allies, setting a tone of reverence that prepares the worshipper for the sacred experience within. The offering is a key, not a weapon, a gentle request for permission to cross over. Beyond formal offerings, people also employed a vast array of symbolic actions and protective objects to navigate liminal spaces safely. The ancient practice of throwing a coin into a well or fountain is a perfect example. While today it might be done for a wish, its origins lie in the belief that these water sources were portals to the underworld or the abode of spirits. The coin was an offering to the guardian of that watery threshold, a payment for safe passage or a tribute to ensure the spirit's blessing. Similarly, the wearing of amulets, a rabbit's foot, a blue bead to ward off the evil eye, or a protective symbol like the Hamsa hand functions as a portable form of guardian negotiation. The amulet is a charm believed to either repel malevolent forces or to signal to neutral spirits that the wearer is under protection, making them less likely to be challenged or harmed as they move through the world. These practices represent a kind of everyday spiritual diplomacy, a way to carry a piece of protective magic and peaceful intent wherever one goes. At the heart of all these diverse practices lies a profound understanding of the nuanced relationship between humans and the forces they believed guarded their world. This wasn't a relationship based solely on terror or blind submission. Instead, it was a complex interplay of reverence, fear, and a very practical desire for security. The reverence was shown through the care and quality of the offerings, the best wine for the lairs, the freshest flowers for the Devarapalas. The fear was acknowledged in the very act of making the offering, an admission that the guardian held power and could cause harm if displeased. And the pragmatic desire for a safe transition was the ultimate goal, turning a potentially dangerous confrontation into a peaceful exchange. This approach highlights a form of spiritual wisdom that often gets overlooked in tales of heroic combat, the power of respect. It recognizes that not all barriers need to be broken down. Some simply require the right key, offered with the right intention. By choosing to appease rather than attack, to negotiate rather than confront, our ancestors demonstrated a sophisticated understanding that sometimes the most courageous act is to acknowledge a power greater than your own and to seek its blessing for your journey. For ancient cultures, the most potent thresholds were not always built by human hands. Long before stone temples and city gates, the world itself was crisscrossed with natural boundaries that hummed with sacred power. The rushing river that divided territories, the treacherous mountain pass that led to unknown lands, the dense forest edge where sunlight gave way to shadow. These were the ultimate liminal spaces where the ordered world of the village met the untamed, unpredictable wild. And it was here, at these raw, earthly borders, that some of the most fascinating and ecologically minded threshold guardians were believed to reside. These beings were not merely protecting a spiritual concept, they were enforcing the fundamental laws of nature itself, ensuring that humans approached the wild with humility and respect. This belief system wove a layer of sacred storytelling directly into the landscape, turning every natural feature into a potential classroom for environmental ethics. Consider the kappa of Japanese folklore, a perfect example of a guardian tied to a specific and dangerous natural feature. This creature was said to lurk in the deep pools and rushing currents of rivers, a mischievous and sometimes malevolent water spirit that looked like a cross between a monkey and a turtle, with a bizarre dish-like depression on its head that held its life-giving water. The kappa's primary role was to guard its aquatic domain, and it did so with a strict code of conduct. It was known to pull careless swimmers or disrespectful travelers beneath the waves, but it was also capable of being appeased. The key was courtesy and offering. A deep bow, which would cause the water in its head dish to spill and weaken it, could save a life. More importantly, villagers would often make offerings of cucumbers, a favored food of the kappa, into the river to ensure a good harvest of fish or to guarantee safe passage across a bridge. The kappa was more than a monster, it was a narrative embodiment of the river's inherent danger and its life-giving bounty. It taught a simple, vital lesson: respect the water because it can both sustain you and kill you. This folklore created a powerful cultural incentive to treat rivers with caution and reverence, directly linking human behavior to natural consequences. High above the rivers, guarding the mist-shrouded peaks of North America, another type of natural sentinel ruled the skies. In the traditions of many Native American tribes, the thunderbird was a colossal, supernatural bird of immense power, so large that the flapping of its wings was said to create the rumble of thunder, and the flash of its eyes the crack of lightning. It was not a mere weather phenomenon but a divine guardian of the upper world, often associated with sacred mountains. The thunderbird served as a protector against great serpents or underwater monsters that represented chaos and imbalance. But its role was also deeply ecological. As a guardian of the high places, it symbolized the ultimate authority of the natural world. Its presence enforced a taboo against disrespecting sacred sites or exploiting the mountains without proper ceremony. To take from the mountain without giving thanks, to hunt its game greedily, or to desecrate a high altar of rock was to invite the wrath of the thunderbird. This powerful archetype framed the entire mountain ecosystem as a sacred trust, a place where human activity was permitted only through a covenant of respect and reciprocal offering, ensuring that these vital watersheds and hunting grounds were preserved for future generations. This worldview, where nature itself is policed by spiritual guardians, had a profoundly practical effect. It fostered a form of innate environmental stewardship long before the term was ever coined. When a forest is not just a collection of trees but the home of a protective spirit, like the Greek dryad or the Slavic leshy, the way you interact with it changes completely. You don't simply chop down an ancient oak. You might first ask permission or make an offering to the spirit within. You don't hunt game to the point of exhaustion for fear of angering the guardian of the animals. These beliefs created a system of sustainable resource management encoded not in law books, but in myth and superstition. The guardian spirit became the enforcer of natural laws, punishing those who overfished a river, hunted a species to scarcity, or polluted a spring. It was a powerful, pre-scientific way of understanding and maintaining ecological balance, where the fear of supernatural retribution served the very real-world purpose of preventing the collapse of fragile ecosystems. This ancient impulse to assign guardianship to nature is far from a forgotten relic. It finds a powerful and direct parallel in our modern conservation efforts. Today, the role of the threshold guardian is often filled by park rangers, conservation officers, and community watchdogs. These modern sentinels stand at the boundaries of our national parks and protected wilderness areas, not to block our entry, but to ensure we cross that threshold mindfully. They enforce rules designed to protect delicate environments, staying on marked trails, packing out all trash, not disturbing wildlife. Their authority replaces the supernatural wrath of the copper or the thunderbird, but their purpose is strikingly similar: to maintain the balance of a sacred space and to punish those who would exploit it disrespectfully. Furthermore, the growing global movement to grant legal personhood to rivers and forests, recognizing them as living entities with rights, is perhaps the ultimate modern extension of this ancient idea. It is a formal, legal acknowledgement that nature itself has boundaries that must be honored, and that we require guardians, both human and legal, to protect them. This continuum, from mythical water spirit to environmental law, shows how our deepest storytelling instincts are now being used to address our most pressing planetary challenges, reminding us that to cross into the natural world is not a right, but a privilege that demands reverence and care. Literature provides a uniquely rich canvas for exploring the idea of threshold guardians, allowing authors to mold these archetypal figures into perfect metaphors for the themes at the very heart of their narratives. One of the most meticulously structured uses of this device comes from Dante Alighieri's 14th century epic, The Divine Comedy, specifically its first part, Inferno. Dante's journey through the 9 concentric circles of hell is essentially a guided tour of sin and its consequences, and each major transition between these tormented realms is overseen by a distinct guardian. The most iconic of these is Minos, the monstrous judge who resides at the entrance to the second circle. Upon encountering a newly arrived soul, Minos wraps his long tail around his own body a specific number of times, each coil representing the circle of hell to which the soul is condemned based on the severity of its sins. He is not a guardian who can be fought or tricked. He is the unyielding embodiment of divine justice itself, a literal arbiter of fate who assigns each soul its eternal address based on its earthly choices. His presence establishes the fundamental rule of Dante's Underworld. The punishment always fits the crime, and the guardian ensures that every soul crosses into the precise torment it has earned, making him a powerful symbol of moral accountability and the inescapable consequences of one's actions. Centuries later, and in a completely different tonal register, Lewis Carroll's Alice's Adventures in Wonderland presents a threshold guardian of an entirely different nature, one that reflects the story's focus on absurdity and identity. The caterpillar, perched atop his mushroom and calmly smoking his hookah, serves as a guardian not of a physical gate, but of Alice's psychological transition from confused child to a more self-possessed individual. He blocks her path not with threats, but with existential riddles and frustratingly circular logic. His most famous question, "Who are you?" is the ultimate challenge to Alice, who is struggling to maintain a stable sense of self in a world that constantly changes her size and undermines her understanding. The caterpillar is a guardian of transformation, and the key to passing him is not force or courage, but introspection and adaptation. He provides the tools for her journey, the two sides of the mushroom that control her growth and shrinkage, but he does not tell her how to use them. Alice must figure that out for herself, learning to navigate the absurdity and seize agency over her own identity. This encounter perfectly illustrates how the guardian archetype can be adapted from a moralistic gatekeeper into a philosophical one, challenging the protagonist to find the answers within rather than providing them outright. In contemporary literature, authors continue to breathe new life into this ancient trope, often using it to explore modern anxieties about belief, society, and what we value. Neil Gaiman's novel American Gods is a masterclass in this kind of reimagining. The book posits that gods and mythological beings exist because people believe in them, and they have been brought to America by generations of immigrants. However, their power has faded in the modern world, supplanted by new deities of technology, media, and globalization. These old gods figures like Odin, Anansi, and Bilquis become threshold guardians in a metaphorical landscape, representing the fading old world and challenging the protagonist Shadow Moon to understand the shifting nature of faith itself. They guard the threshold between the forgotten past and the relentless present. Furthermore, Gaiman populates his America with countless minor spirits, the genii loci, or spirits of place, who guard the thresholds of towns, roads, and even buildings, now largely ignored and weakened by the disbelieving modern world. These beings symbolize the loss of local identity and the sacredness of place in an increasingly homogenized culture, making them poignant guardians of thresholds that we have, as a society, forgotten how to see or cross with reverence. This enduring literary fascination with threshold guardians reveals their ultimate power as narrative devices. They are far more than simple obstacles. They are concentrated symbols of the central conflict in a story. A guardian can physically represent a societal ill, a personal flaw, or a philosophical dilemma that the protagonist must overcome. They force a moment of crisis and decision that propels the plot forward while simultaneously deepening the thematic resonance of the journey. By confronting a guardian, a character is forced to confront the core themes of the narrative itself, be it justice, identity, faith, or change. This allows readers to engage with these complex ideas on an intuitive, emotional level. We don't just read about a character's internal struggle with doubt. We see that doubt given form as a sphinx asking a riddle on a lonely road. We don't just ponder the nature of sin. We see it reflected in the stern gaze of a demonic judge. Literature, by externalizing these internal and abstract battles through the figure of the guardian, provides a powerful and imaginative framework for us to explore the most complex boundaries we face, both as individuals and as a society, long after we close the book. This profound need for divine sentinels finds some of its most powerful expression within the world's major religious traditions, where sacred texts and theological teachings populate the spiritual landscape with formidable guardians who oversee the ultimate transitions of the soul. These are not merely mythical creatures from folklore, but often central figures within a faith's cosmology, embodying core doctrines about justice, mercy, and the very architecture of the afterlife. In Christianity, the Archangel Michael stands as a paramount example. Frequently depicted with a mighty sword and a suit of armor, he is described in the Book of Revelation as the commander of heaven's armies, the one who leads the fight against the dragon, that ancient serpent who is the devil. His role is that of the ultimate celestial defender, guarding the gates of paradise not from mortal souls, but from the corrupting influence of evil itself. He represents the promise that the kingdom of heaven is a sanctified space protected by divine might, and that entry is contingent upon a soul's alignment with goodness, having been cleansed of sin. His presence offers immense comfort to believers, assuring them that the journey's end is safeguarded by a power far greater than any earthly force. In Islamic tradition, the nature of guardianship takes on a different, equally profound dimension with the angel known as Malik. Mentioned in the Quran, Malik is the stern and unwavering custodian of Jahannam, or hell. The texts describe him as never smiling, a figure who informs those condemned to enter that they must abide therein forever. Unlike a demonic torturer, Malik is not an agent of evil but a faithful servant of Allah, executing divine judgment with impartial authority. His existence reinforces the Islamic principle of absolute divine justice and the serious consequences of one's earthly actions. He is the guardian of a terrible threshold, ensuring the strict separation between the realms of punishment and mercy, and his unwavering adherence to his duty underscores the gravity of the afterlife and the importance of living a righteous life in accordance with God's will. He is a reminder that boundaries exist not only for protection but also for containment, maintaining a cosmic order where choices have eternal ramifications. The concept expands into a magnificent cosmic scale within Hinduism through the figure of Shiva as Nataraja, the Lord of the Dance. This is not a guardian of a simple gate, but of the most fundamental threshold imaginable, the dynamic line between creation and destruction. In his iconic bronze form, Shiva dances within a ring of flames, one foot planted on the back of a dwarf demon representing ignorance, and the other foot gracefully raised. His four arms are in constant motion. One hand holds the Damaru drum that beats the rhythm of creation, while another holds the fire that brings about destruction. A third hand is raised in the "fear not" gesture of reassurance, and the fourth points to his raised foot, symbolizing liberation. The entire cosmic cycle of the universe, its birth, its sustenance, its dissolution, and the subsequent period of concealment and re-emergence, is contained within his dance. As Nataraja, Shiva himself is the guardian, the embodiment, and the orchestrator of this perpetual threshold. He does not block a path so much as he is the path, the dynamic process through which all of reality continuously passes. To understand his dance is to understand that all of existence is in a constant state of transition, and that true liberation comes from embracing this eternal flow rather than fearing it. What unites these vastly different divine sentinels, from the warrior archangel to the dutiful custodian to the cosmic dancer, is their foundational role in making the unimaginable realms of the afterlife and the divine somehow comprehensible and orderly for the human mind. They translate abstract theological concepts into relatable figures. The promise of salvation becomes a gate guarded by a heroic protector. the principle of divine justice becomes a stern but fair warden. The mind-bending cycle of universal creation and destruction becomes an elegant, rhythmic dance. By providing these intermediaries, religions create a symbolic language that allows believers to conceptualize their spiritual journey and its ultimate destination. These guardians offer a profound sense of structure amidst the mystery, assuring the faithful that the cosmos is not a chaotic void but a carefully ordered system with defined rules, protected boundaries, and clear pathways. They stand as eternal testament to the idea that the most sacred crossings are never taken alone, but are watched over by powers that ensure every journey and every soul finds its rightful place. Yet for all their noble purpose, the archetype of the threshold guardian holds a shadowy twin, a darker reflection where protection curdles into predation and the sentinel becomes a tyrant. Not all beings stationed at the gate are there to test worthiness. Some are there to exploit it, to extract a cruel toll from any soul desperate enough to pass. This reveals a profound and unsettling layer to the mythology, the fear that the very power meant to safeguard can be twisted, that the guardian can become malevolent, corrupted, or simply drunk on its own authority, transforming the threshold from a sacred space into a brutal checkpoint. Across global folklore, we find these distorted watchers, figures who reflect our deepest anxieties about the abuse of power and the fine, often invisible, line between a protector and an oppressor. Consider the myriad creatures from European folklore that haunt bridges, not to guide but to extort. In countless regional tales, trolls, goblins, or malevolent spirits are said to lurk beneath the wooden planks of a river crossing, emerging not to ask a riddle but to demand an exorbitant payment, often one of flesh or spirit. These are not tests of inner mettle, they are raw exercises in power where the strong prey upon the weak who have no other route. Similarly, in many demonological traditions, certain infernal beings are described as guardians of hell's various precincts, but their torment is not the divine justice of a Malik. It is often portrayed as sadistic and excessive, a gleeful infliction of suffering that serves no higher purpose than its own cruel appetite. These stories give voice to a universal human experience, the dread of encountering a gatekeeper who enjoys saying no, a bureaucrat of the soul whose only power lies in blocking the path of others. This corruption of the guardian's role often stems from a perversion of its original purpose. A being appointed to judge worthiness might slowly begin to enjoy the act of judgment itself, delighting in rejection more than in granting passage. A spirit tasked with collecting a modest, symbolic toll might grow greedy, demanding ever more from travelers. We see this in tales where a once benevolent household spirit, like the Slavic domovoi, turns malicious if repeatedly offended, becoming a poltergeist that harasses the family it once protected. Its role hasn't changed, but its application has warped from measured enforcement into petty tyranny. This narrative explores how easily duty can slide into despotism when oversight is absent and the guardian answers to no higher authority. It's a mythological warning about the corrosive nature of absolute power, even in the most seemingly minor of roles. This darker aspect pushes us to question the very nature of the guardians we accept in our own lives. The myths force our uncomfortable discernment. Is this challenge before me a necessary test for my growth, or is it an arbitrary barrier erected by someone or some system that benefits from my failure? This isn't just a spiritual question, it's a deeply social and political one. Throughout history, unjust rulers, oppressive institutions, and corrupt systems have often positioned themselves as guardians of tradition, of security, of moral purity, using that claimed authority to control, exclude, and exploit. They mimic the function of the mythical guardian to legitimize their oppression, presenting their barriers as tests of loyalty or purity when they are really mechanisms of power maintenance. The stories of malevolent guardians caution us against blind trust in any authority, urging us to look critically at who truly benefits from the obstacles placed in our path. Ultimately, these nuanced stories shatter the simplistic binary of good and evil at the threshold. They reveal that these liminal spaces are not always neutral grounds, but can be active sites of conflict and contested power. The same gateway can represent a path to enlightenment for one and an instrument of control for another. By embracing this complexity, the mythology becomes far richer and more true to life. It acknowledges that the world is not divided neatly into heroes and monsters, and that the most dangerous obstacles we face may not be the fiery dragons we must bravely slay, but the smiling sentinels who claim to have our best interests at heart while quietly locking the gates to our own future. These darker tales don't diminish the guardian archetype, they deepen it, reminding us that true wisdom lies not in blindly obeying the rules of the gate, but in understanding who made them, who enforces them, and who they truly serve. When we step back to look at the global panorama of these guardian myths, a breathtaking pattern emerges. It is a paradox of both profound unity and dazzling diversity. From the frozen fjords of Scandinavia to the humid river valleys of India, from the high deserts of Mesoamerica to the islands of the Aegean, cultures with no possible contact with one another all felt the same deep-seated need to place a watcher at the gate. The core blueprint is unmistakably shared. Everywhere, these beings are designed to test those who approach. Everywhere, they demand a demonstration of respect, whether through an offering, a correct answer, or a show of courage. And everywhere, they serve as powerful external symbols for the internal fears and uncertainties that arise whenever we stand at the brink of the unknown. This shared psychological architecture points to something fundamental in the human condition, a universal intuition that meaningful transitions should not be undertaken lightly, and that crossing into a new state of being requires a moment of reckoning. Yet, the moment we move from this universal blueprint to the specific cultural expressions, a world of fascinating difference opens up. The values, aesthetics, and preferred methods of a society are painted onto this archetypal canvas in vibrant local colors. Consider the traditional Chinese door guards, often depicted as the fierce but righteous generals Qin Shi Bao and Yu Chai Gong. Their images are pasted on front gates during the new year, not to challenge individuals with a personal ordeal, but to act as communal protectors. Their primary function is to ward off evil influences and malevolent spirits for the entire household, ensuring health, prosperity, and harmony for the family within. The emphasis is on collective well-being and social order, reflecting the deep Confucian values that underpin the culture. The guardian's role is to maintain the stability and safety of the community unit, a stark contrast to the more individualistic trials found elsewhere. Now place that image beside the Greek harpies from the tale of Jason and the Argonauts. These were vicious, winged creatures of storm and punishment who swooped down to snatch food from the hands of the blind King Phineas, leaving a foul stench in their wake. They were not protectors of a community's harmony, but instruments of torment for a specific individual, sent by the gods to punish his transgressions. Overcoming them was a personal, heroic feat for the Argonauts, a classic Western narrative focusing on the individual's struggle against a punishing force. The harpy is not about maintaining order but about enduring a divine ordeal, highlighting a cultural focus on personal heroism, confronting punishment, and earning redemption through individual action. This divergence extends beyond the nature of the challenge to the very strategy for overcoming it. Some cultures wholeheartedly embrace the path of negotiation and appeasement. Across the ancient Roman world, travelers would leave small offerings at Herm's stone markers dedicated to Hermes, the god of boundaries, that stood at crossroads. This was not a confrontation but a transaction, a respectful payment to the spirit of the place for safe passage. In countless other traditions, from leaving milk for the domovoi in Russia to presenting flowers to temple Devarapalas in India, the preferred method is one of diplomacy. The guardian is treated as a potential ally whose favor can be won through respect and reciprocity. This approach reflects a worldview that sees the cosmos as a network of relationships to be carefully maintained. On the opposite end of the spectrum lies the path of conquest and domination, a narrative famously championed in many Western myths. The archetype is the dragon slayer, Beowulf facing Grendel, St. George slaying the dragon, or Sigurd defeating Fafnir. Here, the guardian is not negotiated with. It is a monstrous incarnation of chaos that must be utterly vanquished by force of arms and will. The underlying philosophy is one of imposing order upon chaos, of the hero proving his mettle by conquering the untamable. This valorization of conquest reflects cultural values that celebrate individual achievement, martial prowess, and the triumph of civilization over the wild, untamed forces of nature. These variations are not random. They are a direct reflection of the environmental pressures, social structures, and philosophical underpinnings of each culture. A society living in a harsh, unpredictable landscape might envision more monstrous and unforgiving guardians, reflecting their daily struggle for survival. A society built on strict social hierarchies might create guardians that enforce those hierarchies, testing for purity or noble birth. A culture with a strong tradition of animism, believing that spirits inhabit all things, will naturally favor guardians that can be communicated with and appeased. By studying these differences, we are granted a unique window into the soul of a culture. We see what it most fears, what it most values, and what it believes is necessary to navigate the perilous journey of life. Ultimately, this rich cross-cultural tapestry does more than just catalog different kinds of monsters and gods. It teaches a vital lesson in empathy and perspective. It reveals that there is no single, correct way to face the thresholds in our lives. The Japanese Tengu that tests a samurai's humility is not a better or worse guardian than the Celtic fairy hound that patrols the border between worlds. They are different answers to the same universal human question. By appreciating the entire spectrum from the negotiable to the unconquerable, from the community-minded to the individually focused, we learn to see our own challenges through a wider lens. We understand that the barriers we face can be approached with a toolbox of strategies, sometimes with an offering of respect, sometimes with raw courage, sometimes with cleverness, and sometimes with quiet humility. This global perspective on guardian myths fosters a deep respect for the myriad ways humanity has learned to express a shared truth, that every crossing matters, and how we choose to meet the watcher at the gate defines not just our journey, but who we become. So how do we take this ancient map and use it to navigate the real, often messy, transitions of our modern lives? The answer lies in a powerful shift in perspective, a conscious reframing of the obstacles we face. That looming anxiety about a career change isn't just nervousness, it is your personal threshold guardian, a psychological sentinel asking if you have the courage to leave the familiar behind and the resilience to build something new. The deep-seated communication issues in a relationship aren't just problems, they are a collective guardian, challenging both partners to develop greater empathy, vulnerability, and honesty before they can cross together into a deeper, more intimate chapter. Even a difficult health diagnosis can be viewed through this lens, not as a punishment, but as a formidable guardian demanding that we learn profound lessons about patience, self-care, and the preciousness of each moment. By seeing these life events as guardians, we stop seeing ourselves as victims of random misfortune and start seeing ourselves as heroes on a journey, facing necessary tests that are designed not to break us, but to forge us into someone stronger and wiser. This reframing is the first and most crucial step, but it must be followed by action. We must learn the language of these inner guardians, and for that, we have modern tools that function like ancient rituals of preparation. The practice of journaling, for instance, becomes a way to converse with your fear by writing down the anxious thoughts. What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? You are essentially posing the guardian's riddle to yourself on paper, giving it form so it can be understood and answered. Meditation offers another path, creating the quiet mental space to sit with discomfort instead of immediately fleeing from it. In that stillness, you might observe the sensation of anxiety without judgment, seeing it not as a monster to be slain, but as a message to be decoded, perhaps a signal that you need more preparation or that you're confronting a value that is deeply important to you. And therapy provides a guided expedition with a skilled facilitator helping you to identify the specific nature of your inner guardians, understand their origins, and develop healthy strategies to integrate their lessons rather than being locked in a perpetual, exhausting battle with them. The ultimate goal of this work is not to obliterate our inner challenges, but to befriend them. This is the core of the ancient wisdom. In myths, the hero doesn't always destroy the guardian. Sometimes they earn its respect, learn its secrets, or even gain it as an ally. Your inner critic, that voice that constantly points out your flaws, might be reframed as a harsh but ultimately concerned guardian of your standards. Instead of trying to silence it completely, you can learn to thank it for its vigilance while also gently informing it that its methods are outdated and unhelpful. You integrate its desire for excellence but discard its cruelty. Your procrastination, often seen as laziness, might be a guardian blocking the path because it fears the judgment that will come if you truly put your work out into the world. Befriending it means acknowledging that fear, addressing the underlying vulnerability, and making a plan that feels safe enough for that protective part of you to finally stand aside. This process transforms a daunting internal adversary into a source of valuable information about your own needs and wounds. When we learn to approach our lives with this mindset, every transition, no matter how difficult, is imbued with a new sense of meaning and intention. The struggle is no longer a meaningless pain to be endured but a purposeful chapter in your own heroic journey. The anxiety before a big presentation becomes the dragon you must face to claim the treasure of professional recognition. The grief after a loss becomes the dark river you must cross slowly and painfully to reach a new shore of emotional resilience. This perspective is incredibly empowering. It gives you agency. You are not a passive passenger being buffeted by life's storms. You are an active participant in your own transformation, consciously gathering your resources, facing your guardians, and choosing to grow through the challenge. You begin to cross your thresholds not with frantic desperation, but with a quiet, earned readiness. In the end, this ancient archetype offers us a profound and enduring gift, the understanding that the barriers we face are not here to stop us but to shape us. They are the loyal, if sometimes harsh, teachers appointed by our own psyche to ensure that we do not arrive at our next destination unchanged. They guarantee that our transformations are earned and therefore real and lasting. By honoring these guardians, both the mythical ones from our oldest stories and the personal ones we meet in our daily lives, we participate in a timeless human ritual. We acknowledge that growth is never free or easy, but that it is always possible if we have the courage to face the watcher at the gate, learn its lesson, and finally, step forward into the person we are meant to become. And it's within the interactive realms of video games that this ancient archetype finds its most potent and personal modern expression. Titles like The Legend of Zelda are built upon this very premise, transforming players from passive observers into active heroes on a literal journey. Think of the very structure of these games. You arrive at the entrance to a vast new region, only to find your path blocked by an imposing, magical barrier or a formidable creature. To proceed, you must first venture into a dungeon, a modern-day labyrinth where you solve puzzles, battle lesser foes, and ultimately uncover a new tool or weapon: the hookshot, the bow, the master key. This item is more than just a piece of code. It is the symbolic proof that you have gained the wisdom, skill, or strength required to overcome the challenge. Then, and only then, can you return to that guardian and defeat it, whether through combat or clever use of your new ability. This gameplay loop is a direct, interactive translation of the hero's journey. The Guardian ensures that the player does not simply wander into high-level areas unprepared. It enforces a narrative and mechanical progression, making the eventual victory feel truly earned. This process mirrors our own lived experience so perfectly. We cannot face a major life challenge without first gathering the necessary internal and external resources, and the game makes this metaphorical truth a tangible, playable reality. Cinema, with its powerful visual language, uses threshold guardians to explore far more complex and often darker themes, weaving them into the emotional core of a story. Guillermo del Toro's masterpiece, Pan's Labyrinth, is a stunning example. Set against the brutal backdrop of post-Civil War Spain, the film follows a young girl named Ophelia who escapes her grim reality into a mythical underworld. Here, she is given tasks by the faun, Pan, a classic and deeply ambiguous guardian figure. Is he a guide, a tempter, or a tester? His tasks lead her to other guardians, most memorably the Pale Man, a monstrous being who sits motionless at a lavish feast with his eyeballs resting on a plate before him. The mythic rule is clear: she must not eat any of the food. This guardian does not attack unprovoked. It is her own hunger and disobedience that activates its horrific wrath. The Pale Man is not just a monster in a maze. He is a profound symbol of the fascism and gluttonous consumption Ophelia faces in the real world, and a test of her obedience and self-control. Her failure has consequences, reminding us that these narrative thresholds are not always about success, but about the painful lessons learned in failure. The film uses these guardians to blur the lines between fantasy and reality, showing how the moral and psychological tests of our imagination are inextricably linked to the challenges we face in our actual lives. The cultural impact of these stories is profound because they tap into a shared, archetypal language that resonates across generations. When a child plays Zelda or a viewer watches Ophelia confront the Pale Man, they are not just being entertained, they are participating in an ancient pattern of storytelling that teaches us how to be human. These narratives provide a safe space to practice confronting our own fears and obstacles. They externalize internal struggles, giving a face to abstract concepts like temptation, fear, or authority, and they provide a framework for overcoming them. This perpetuates a fundamental understanding of growth, that it is never easy, that it requires facing challenges head-on, and that the reward on the other side is a stronger, wiser, more capable self. These modern myths become a kind of cultural curriculum, preparing us in a deep, subconscious way for the real-world thresholds we will all inevitably face, from the anxieties of starting a new school to the moral complexities of adulthood. Furthermore, contemporary storytellers are brilliantly adapting and subverting these ancient tropes to reflect our evolving values. The tradition often presented guardians as monolithic obstacles to be destroyed, the evil dragon, the wicked witch. But modern narratives increasingly complicate this picture. It is now common for a guardian to be revealed as a misunderstood protector, or for the hero's task to be not destruction but negotiation or reconciliation. A character might learn that the monstrous beast guarding a forest is actually the last of its kind, protecting the ecosystem from human greed. The challenge then shifts from slaying the creature to convincing the townsfolk to change their ways. This subversion reflects a growing cultural maturity, a move away from simplistic, us versus them narratives and toward a more nuanced understanding of conflict, conservation, and coexistence. It shows that the Guardian is not always wrong, and that the hero's journey can be about listening and understanding as much as it is about conquering. This evolution ensures that these ancient symbols never grow stale. They are constantly being reimagined to speak to the pressing concerns and refined ethics of each new generation, proving their incredible durability and their endless capacity to help us navigate an ever-changing world. But the evolution of these ancient archetypes doesn't stop at the edges of our digital screens. As our world becomes more interconnected, the very stories we tell about guardians are beginning to blend and cross-pollinate in fascinating new ways. Global interconnectedness, fueled by the internet and the rapid exchange of culture, is leading to a creative fusion of mythological traditions. Artists, writers, and game developers are no longer confined to the folklore of their own region. They have the entire world's pantheon of monsters and protectors at their fingertips. This is giving rise to a new generation of hybrid guardians in our storytelling. Imagine a video game boss that combines the cunning of a Japanese kitsune with the imposing physicality of a Norse giant. Picture a novel where a hero must appease a spirit born from both West African and Celtic lore to cross a dimensional rift. These new composite beings are more than just cool mashups. They reflect our growing global identity. They represent a world where cultural boundaries are becoming more permeable, and our collective mythology is expanding to include a richer, more diverse tapestry of protective and challenging figures. This fusion allows for incredibly nuanced storytelling, where a single guardian can embody multiple cultural values and types of tests, offering a more complex and reflective mirror of our modern, interconnected selves. Looking toward the horizon, our future challenges are already hinting at the next wave of threshold guardians we might create. The vast, unexplored depths of our oceans, which we are only beginning to understand, could easily become the setting for new legends. As deep-sea exploration advances and we confront the mysteries and fragility of these ecosystems, we might envision colossal, bioluminescent beings, guardians of the abyssal plains, who represent the awesome and terrifying power of the deep, punishing those who would plunder its resources without respect. Similarly, the burgeoning era of space exploration and the potential colonization of other worlds like Mars presents the ultimate physical and psychological frontier. The red planet itself, with its harsh, unforgiving environment, could be personified as a guardian, a silent, demanding sentinel that tests human ingenuity, cooperation, and resilience to the absolute limit. These new guardians would symbolize the immense ethical and environmental responsibilities that come with crossing into these new realms. They wouldn't just block a path, they would ask if we are wise enough and humble enough to become stewards of worlds beyond our own. This relentless adaptation of the guardian archetype, from temple gates to algorithm codes and from forest spirits to Martian personifications, reveals something fundamental and enduring about the human psyche. We have a deep, innate need to personify the boundaries we encounter. An abstract rule or a simple physical barrier isn't enough. We instinctively give it a face, a form, and a story. This process of personification is a vital cognitive tool. It transforms an impersonal challenge into a narrative we can understand and engage with. By creating a guardian, we turn a complex problem into a character we can outsmart, a force we can negotiate with, or a lesson we can learn from. It allows us to frame our struggles within the timeless, comforting structure of a hero's journey, providing meaning and agency in the face of overwhelming complexity. This ancient archetype remains one of our most vital tools for navigating existence because it is so profoundly adaptable. It gives us a way to map our fears, to ritualize our transitions, and to remind ourselves that every meaningful crossing requires us to pause, to prepare, and to prove our readiness for whatever lies on the other side. Throughout history, these guardians have stood as profound mirrors reflecting our deepest relationship with change itself. They are not merely relics of a superstitious past but enduring psychological blueprints, teaching us that any meaningful transition, whether stepping into a new chapter of life, embracing a fresh idea, or letting go of a former self, demands a moment of reckoning. These mythical watchers give a face and a form to the abstract anxieties that so often hold us back, transforming a vague sense of dread into a challenge that can be understood, met, and ultimately overcome. From the stone sphinxes guarding pharaonic tombs to the digital gatekeepers of our modern algorithms, the archetype persists because the human experience of crossing boundaries is universal and timeless. We are all, in our own ways, perpetual travelers standing at the edge of the known, peering into the unknown, and gathering the courage to take that next step. The true lesson woven into these stories is not that we must vanquish every obstacle with brute force, but that we must engage with it consciously. Sometimes the path forward requires the raw courage of a dragon slayer, but other times it demands the quiet wisdom of a negotiator, the patient humility of a student, or the compassionate understanding of a healer. The guardian's form reveals the nature of the test. A roaring beast might represent a fear that needs confronting, while a silent, locked door may symbolize a hidden part of ourselves that needs acknowledging. By learning to recognize these patterns in our own lives, we gain a powerful tool for personal navigation, that nervousness before a major presentation. That's your guardian, the reluctance to have a difficult conversation. That, too, is a sentinel at the gate. These are not nuisances to be eliminated but invitations to grow, asking us to prove our readiness for the transformation that awaits on the other side. So the next time you find yourself hesitating on a threshold, large or small, remember the watchers. Think of the countless souls across millennia who have stood where you stand, facing their own versions of Cerberus, their own riddling sphinxes, their own mysterious bridges guarded by solemn figures. Let their stories remind you that this moment of tension is not a barrier to your journey but an essential part of it. It is the refining fire that forges stronger character, the challenging question that leads to deeper wisdom, and the necessary friction that makes movement possible. You are the latest hero in an ancient, ongoing story of becoming. We deeply thank you for exploring these historical mysteries and mythologies with us. We would love to hear which guardians speak most powerfully to you. Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you haven't already, subscribe to join us on our next journey into the hidden stories that shape our world.